Zoro, is it not?
Bye-bye, darling.
We need to find him. I think I have found our best route into the Grand Line. We're not too far off, but there's some dangerous traversal ahead. Looks like this waterway here cuts right through the Red Line.
I'm not the navigator, but doesn't this...
What? I need 2 more swords. I'm feeling off.
Since the sword shatter and ass kicking Mihawk gave you?
Shut up, I don't need it. Well, that's all I needed to.
Sorry, Usopp. Another hurtful time.
This isn't over yet. Where's Luffy?
It is a noble job.
I'm buying food for us.
We having more swords of use for all of us.
You take this, you pay me back with 300.
Throw this scum in the brig. I'm going on patrol.
Feels good finally buying something for myself for once.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, maybe not something, but someone.
Welcome to the Cineflux. My name is Marufa, and today we are talking about one of the most exciting, emotionally rich, visually breathtaking pieces of television I have watched in a very, very long time. So let us begin at the beginning, not of the story, but of the context that makes this story matter. One Piece is, by almost any measure, the most successful manga series ever created. Eiichiro Oda began publishing it in Weekly Shonen Jump back in 1997, and it has been running continuously ever since. By the time Netflix started working on a live action adaptation, the manga had sold over 570 million copies worldwide. That number is not a typo. 517 million. To put that into perspective, the entire Harry Potter book series has sold roughly 600 million copies total across all 7 volumes combined. One Piece as a single ongoing series is in that same stratosphere. The anime, which has been airing since 1999, has over 1,000 episodes and is still going. The franchise generates billions in merchandise revenue every year. It is in Japan particularly a cultural institution on the level of a national landmark. You do not simply adapt One Piece. You inherit a responsibility. You step into a relationship between a story and its readers that is nearly 3 decades old and deeply, profoundly personal. Netflix's first season, released in 2023, managed to honor that responsibility in ways nobody expected. Showrunners Matt Owens and Joe Tracz, working in close collaboration with Oda himself as executive producer, delivered a season that not only satisfied longtime fans but genuinely introduced the world of One Piece to millions of newcomers who had never touched the manga or the anime. The first season earned an 86% critic score and a 95% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It debuted in the top 10 on Netflix in over 90 countries. It was, by any reasonable measurement, one of the most successful anime to live action adaptations in history. And now, in March of 2026, the second season arrived, subtitled Into the Grand Line. 10 episodes all dropped simultaneously on March 10th, and it carried the full weight of everything the first season built. The title of this season, Into the Grand Line, is not just a subtitle, it is a declaration. The Grand Line is the most dangerous stretch of sea in the One Piece world, a magnetic and meteorological ocean that stretches around the entire globe like a belt and is home to the world's most powerful pirates, the most bizarre islands, the most terrifying enemies. Every pirate who has ever wanted to be king of the pirates has had to sail it. Most who tried never came back. The Grand Line is where legends are made. And it is where season 2 lives, breathes, and dares to be think great to be great. The season covers 5 story arcs from the original manga: Logo Town, Reverse Mountain, Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and Drum Island. These arcs suffered as the threshold crossing, the moment where the Straw Hat Pirates truly leave behind the relative safety of the East Blue and step into the genuinely unknown. The show is created as a Netflix original in partnership with Shueisha and produced by Tomorrow Studios, an ITV Studios partner. The directors this season include Emma Sullivan, who handled 4 episodes, Joseph Kubota Waleka, who covered 3, and Lucas Etlin, who directed 3 episodes as well. The main cast returns in full: Dingeki Godoy as Monkey D, Luffy, Makenyo as Roronoa Zoro, Emily Rudd as Nami, Jacob Romero Gibson as Usopp, and Das Skylar as Sanji. And this season adds a remarkable roster of new faces: Michaela Hoover voicing Tony Topper, Kaditra Chandran as Miss Wednesday, Lara Abova as Miss All Sunday, Kalimkar as Smoker, Julia Revald as Tashigi, Katie Segal as Dr. Hira, Mark Harlech as Dr. Hiriluk, David Dastmalchian as Mr. Hira, Trey Camus Johnson as Mr. Five, and the man who has frankly been impossible not to talk about since the moment his casting was announced, Joe Manganiello as Sir Crocodile, Mr. Zero, the Desert King, this season's main antagonist. And based on everything I saw across these 10 episodes, worth every second of anticipation, this is an adventure series. It is a pirate story. It is a love letter to found family and the unbreakable bonds forged by people who choose each other. And this season, it is something more. It is a story about what it costs to dream this big, what the ocean demands of the people who dare to cross it, and whether, when everything is stripped away, the will to keep going is enough to carry you through. That is what this season is at its core, and I have been thinking about it since the moment I finished the final episode. When I first sat down with this season, late on the night of March 10th, the moment those 10 episodes hit Netflix, I want to be honest with you about what I was expecting, not what I was hoping, what I was expecting, because those are two different things. And being a film lover who has been burned before means you learn to keep hope in one pocket and expectation in another. I was expecting a solid continuation. I was expecting the crew to feel familiar and warm. I was expecting some beautiful visual moments, some genuine action sequences, probably a couple of standout performances in the new cast additions. I was expecting something good. What I got was something that made me forget I was reviewing it. There is a specific thing that happens when a piece of storytelling genuinely captures you, not just intellectually, not just aesthetically, but emotionally and fully. And it is this: you stop cataloging, you stop noting the cuts, you stop listening for the score beneath the dialogue. You stop watching it as a critic and you start experiencing it as a human being. That happened for me somewhere in the 3rd episode of this season, and it did not fully release me until long after the credits rolled on the finale. The opening of this season is stunning. Without giving anything specific away, the first episode begins in Logo Town, the last stop before the Grand Line, with a scene that manages to do 3 things simultaneously that should be nearly impossible to balance. It reminds you of everything that came before, it grounds you in the present stakes, and it immediately, in its first visual breath, tells you that you have entered a different gear. The production design alone communicates something profound. This place feels inhabited, worn, layered with history, alive. The texture of the world has deepened. The sky looks different over Locket Town. The light lands differently. If the first season of One Piece felt like falling in love, that first rush of warmth and wonder and recognition, then season 2 feels like the deepening. That second stage where love stops being butterflies and starts being bone structure, where you understand that you are not just enjoying this, you are genuinely attached to these people, and that attachment carries real weight when the show starts testing it. The overall atmosphere of the season lives in a kind of sustained tension that the first season was only beginning to develop. There is joy here, enormous, infectious, genuinely exuberant joy in some scenes, but underneath it always there is the awareness that the Grand Line is not a forgiving place. The show earns that tension. It does not manufacture it with cheap stakes or hollow threats. It builds it through character, through consequence, through the growing sense that the crew is pushing further into territory where their old skills and old certainties are no longer enough. If I had to compare it to other things, and comparisons are always imprecise but sometimes useful, I would say this season is doing something in the neighborhood of what The Empire Strikes Back did for the original Star Wars trilogy. It is darker, more complex, more emotionally demanding than its predecessor, and it ends in a place that is not triumphant resolution, but purposeful open wound. A good hurt. The kind of ending that makes you eager and slightly desperate for what comes next. Was it what I expected? No, not even close. It was better, more considered, more emotionally intelligent, more brave. Now let us talk about the story itself, and I will keep the truly major spoilers out of this section. Those come later, but I want to walk you through the architecture of this season in enough depth that you understand what kind of narrative machine you are dealing with. This season opens with Logo Town, and this is already a departure from where season 1 ended. Logo Town is significant in the One Piece mythology for a very specific reason. It is the place where Goldie Roger, the Pirate King himself, was born and where he was executed. It is the last port before the Grand Line. It is, in the symbolic grammar of the story, a threshold, and the show leans into that meaning hard. For Luffy, a young man who has lived his entire life burning to follow in Roger's footsteps, standing on the same soil where the greatest pirate who ever lived met his end, is not just logistically significant. It is cosmically weighted. The show handles this beautifully. From Logtown, the crew navigates toward Reverse Mountain, the only entrance to the Grand Line, which is itself one of the more visually spectacular concepts the show brings to life this season. The idea that seawater flows upward on this mountain, carrying ships up to the peak before sending them down into the Grand Line proper, is the kind of genuinely wild piece of world building that should look ridiculous in live action and instead looks extraordinary. What happens at the peak of Reverse Mountain introduces a character and a mystery that will carry emotional weight all the way to the finale. Then comes Whiskey Peak, which shifts the season's tone into something that is deceptively lighter on the surface and considerably more sinister underneath. The crew arrives at an island where everyone seems extraordinarily friendly. The hospitality is almost suspicious in its enthusiasm, and it is. There is a trap here, a well constructed one layered with questions about identity and loyalty, and the way it unfolds reveals something about several characters that I genuinely did not fully expect from the adaptation. The show makes a choice in how it frames this deception that deepens its emotional impact considerably beyond the source material. Little Garden is where the season starts to flex its muscles in earnest. This island, where two giant warriors have been locked in a 100-year duel, is visually unlike anything the show has done before. Prehistoric, ancient, enormous, and it serves as the backdrop for both spectacular action and, quietly, one of the season's most surprisingly moving sequences. The giant Story and Brogy, played by Werner Koetzer and Brendan Murray, are figures who have been fighting each other for so long that their battle has become a kind of honor in itself, a ritual of respect between warriors. And watching Luffy respond to them, watching what that dynamic unlocks in his character, is genuinely touching. Drum Island is where the season ends, and it is also where the season's deepest emotional heart lives. This arc introduces Tony Chopper, the most anticipated new addition to the series, and it does so with a level of craft and delicacy that surprised me. Drum Island is a kingdom of perpetual winter, surrounded by mountains, isolated, cold in every sense of the word. And its center is a story about a reindeer who can transform between three forms because he ate a devil fruit, a reindeer who was rejected by both human society and his own kind, who found a father figure in a dying doctor, and who has been carrying the weight of that loss while trying to keep that doctor's dream alive. That is not a light story. That is a story about grief and belonging, and the question of whether you can be loved by a world that does not have a category for you. And this season tells it with real tenderness. The overall structure of the season is linear. It moves forward in time from one arc to the next, but it is layered in the sense that threads established early pay off late. Characters introduced in one arc reappear in another in ways that change how you read the first encounter. The pacing is notably tighter than the first season, which was itself commendably paced. There's almost no fat here. Every episode serves a purpose, every scene has a reason to exist. The show has found its rhythm, and it moves within that rhythm with confidence. Is it character driven or plot driven? Here is the thing about One Piece as a story. It is both simultaneously in a way that very few adventure narratives manage. The plot is enormous and elaborate and endlessly inventive, but it is always in service of character. Every island they visit reveals something new about someone on the crew. Every battle is as much about who Luffy and his friends are as it is about who they are fighting. This season understands that balance. It lives inside it. And that understanding is, ultimately, what separates a great piece of adventure storytelling from a merely entertaining one. Season gets right because that list is long and each item on it is worth taking the time to explore properly. Let us start with the people on screen because ultimately no amount of production budget, no amount of stunning visual effects, no amount of clever writing can save a story if the actors at its center do not make you believe in and care about the human beings they are playing. And one of the single greatest strengths of the second season is that the entire ensemble, returning cast and new additions alike, is operating at a level that feels genuinely elevated above where they already were. Iñaki Godoy as Monkey D. Luffy remains, to put it simply, one of the most inspired pieces of casting in recent television history. This is a performance that should not work as well as it does. Think about what is actually being asked of him. Luffy is a character who is absurdly over the top, physically cartoonish, emotionally transparent, frequently oblivious to social norms, and possessed of an unshakable conviction in himself and his friends that borders on the irrational. On paper, that sounds like a nightmare to make believable in live action. And yet, Godoy makes it not only believable but genuinely moving. He has this quality, a kind of radiant, unself-conscious physicality that makes Luffy feel real without ever making him feel ordinary. When he laughs, you feel it. When he goes quiet, which is rare and therefore always significant, you feel that too. What season 2 gives Godoy that season 1 could not fully explore is vulnerability. There are moments in these 10 episodes where Luffy faces the kind of helplessness that his relentless optimism has never had to truly reckon with, and Godoy handles those moments with a delicacy that surprised even me. There is a scene, I will describe it loosely here without spoiling its context, where Luffy is forced to watch something happen that he cannot stop, and the way Godoy holds the silence after it, the way his face does not collapse into theatrical grief, but instead goes utterly still in a way that reads as genuinely extraordinary acting. It is the kind of moment that makes you stop and think, this actor is better than the conversation around him has fully acknowledged. But Godoy is not alone in this. Macanio as Zoro has a significant season, and he brings it fully. The character of Zoro, a swordsman of unmatched skill who carries his ambition and his grief in equal measure and almost never lets either show, could easily become a cool but emotionally distant figure. Macanio finds the humanity inside the stoicism. There is a scene where Zoro faces 100 opponents in a sequence that functions simultaneously as spectacular action choreography and as genuine character revelation. Watching him move through that sequence, you are not just watching a swordsman win a fight. You are watching someone prove something to themselves. The quiet pride afterward, the way Makinyu lets it land without underlining it, is the mark of an actor who understands his character deeply. Emily Rudd as Nami continues to be one of the show's secret weapons. Nami is the crew member with the most complicated moral interior in these early arcs, a woman whose past has taught her that survival requires detachment and whose present keeps ambushing her with reasons to care about people despite herself. Rudd plays that contradiction with beautiful precision. She is funny when the script calls for it, fierce when it demands it, and quietly heartbreaking in the moments when Nami's armor slips just enough to let you see what is underneath. Her chemistry with the rest of the crew feels warmer and more natural this season. The work they have all put in together shows. Jacob Bomelo Gibson as Usopp takes on a richer dimension in this season, and Gibson absolutely rises to it. Usopp is, at his core, a liar who tells stories because stories are the only currency he has. But this season deepens that idea into something more complex. His lies are not just self aggrandizement, they are a form of will, a way of speaking a version of himself into existence that the world has not yet recognized. Gibson finds real emotional depth in that concept, particularly in the Little Garden arc, where Usopp is forced to confront the distance between the heroic version of himself he tells stories about and the frightened young man he actually is. The scene where he chooses to close that distance without magical transformation, without sudden power, just with decision, is one of the small, quiet triumphs of the season. The stellar as Sanji gets less screen time in the first half of this season than the character perhaps deserves, but he makes every scene count. And in the Drum Island stretch toward the season's final episodes, Skylar gets a scene of genuine emotional weight that he plays with a tenderness and a restraint that stayed with me. I will not say more about it here, but pay attention when it comes. Now let me tell you about the newcomers. And I want to start not with the biggest name but with the two performances that for me formed the emotional beating heart of this entire season. Katie Sagal as Dr. Kuraha and Mark Halleck as Dr. Harilo. These two actors are given the task of carrying the Drum Island arc's emotional architecture, a story about a dying doctor whose impossible dream to bring cherry blossoms to a snow-locked island has been the north star of his life, even when the world gave him every reason to abandon it. Harleka's hair look is luminous. He plays this man, eccentric, warm, brave, entirely without cynicism, despite having every reason for it, with such open-hearted sincerity that you fall for him immediately, which makes what happens to him devastating in exactly the way it needs to be. His final scenes in the season are some of the finest television I have watched in years. Genuinely. And Sagal as Kureha is the perfect counterpoint, abrasive, caustic, brilliant, concealing a love for Chopper so fierce and so carefully hidden that when it finally surfaces, it breaks you. The relationship these two actors create between their characters, this old doctor and a reindeer she has raised with furious, unconditional love while pretending she does not love him at all, is the emotional spine of the season's final third, and it is extraordinary. Then there is Joe Manganiello as Sir Crocodile, the season's principal antagonist. And here is the thing about this casting that was always interesting. Manganiello is not conventionally associated with the kind of layered, contained villainy that Sir Crocodile requires. He's an actor known for physical presence, for charisma, for a certain kind of magnetism. But what he does with Crocodile in this season goes beyond charisma. He plays this man, this brilliant, ruthless, magnificently patient schemer, with a deliberate economy that is genuinely chilling. Crocodile does not need to raise his voice. Manganello understands this completely. The threat is always there, immovable and absolute. Like the desert, he commands. He says things quietly that would terrify you if they were shouted. And in the scenes where we first begin to understand the full scope of what Crocodile is planning, Monganele lets you see the intelligence behind the eyes without ever showing his hand completely. It is a performance built on what it withholds as much as what it reveals. Lara Bova as Miss All Sunday, the mysterious figure who moves between loyalty and something altogether more complex, is magnetic in the few scenes she is given this season. She is being set up for something larger, and you feel it in every interaction. Her stillness is different from Manganiello's, where his is predatory. Hers is philosophical, watchful, evaluating. She and Manganiello share a dynamic that crackles with unspoken tension every time they occupy the same frame. And Tony Chopper. Oh, where do I even begin with Chopper? The challenge of bringing Chopper to life in live action was frankly enormous. This is a fully CGI character who needs to generate genuine emotional warmth, a small blue-nosed reindeer with a hat who oscillates between three distinct physical forms and who needs to make an audience cry through a digital face. The team chose to voice him with Mika Lahuva, and the decision is perfect. Hoover captures something essential in Chopper, a kind of wounded eagerness, a longing for belonging that has never been met, that makes every scene he's in feel human despite the obvious unreality of his appearance. And the CGI itself is remarkable. The textures are warm, the movement is precise without being uncanny, the eyes hold feeling. When Chopper cries, and he will make you cry with him, it is not a cartoon crying, it is real crying. Moving from performance into the architecture of the writing itself, the screenplay for this season is a genuinely impressive achievement. 5 arcs across 10 episodes, each with its own distinct tonal identity, each needing to serve both its own internal story and the larger whole, and the writers manage all of it without letting any single thread go slack. What is most admirable about the screenplay choices this season is the willingness to slow down. Not to stop, not to stall, but to slow down in the places where the story earns it, to let emotional moments breathe rather than rushing to the next spectacle. The Drum Island arc, in particular, is based with the kind of care that you associate with prestige drama rather than action adventure. It takes its time introducing Chopper's world, the cold isolation of that kingdom, the history between Hyluk and Kuroha, the loneliness at the center of Chopper's existence before it starts moving toward its emotional climax. And because it takes that time when the climax arrives, it hits with a force that is almost overwhelming. The writing also makes some genuinely bold choices in how it adapts its source material. Without going into full detail here, the season rearranges certain story elements, deepens certain character relationships, and adds connective tissue between arcs that was not present in the original manga. These are not compromises or shortcuts. They are deliberate, creative decisions made by people who understand what this story is about at its deepest level and who want to make those themes more immediate and emotionally resonant for a television audience. In almost every case, the changes serve the story beautifully. The dialogue is a particular strength. One Piece live action has always had to navigate the challenge of translating the heightened, often mythic register of shonen manga dialogue into something that sounds natural from a real human mouth. Season 2 has gotten considerably better at this. There are lines in this season that are quietly extraordinary, sentences that arrive with the weight of something that has been earned over many episodes, and then land with precision and simplicity. The best dialogue here does not feel like it has been written, it feels like it has been lived. And then there is the visual language of this season, the direction and cinematography, and this is where Into the Grand Line separates itself from virtually everything else in the action adventure space on television right now. Director Emma Sullivan, who handles 4 of the 10 episodes, has a visual intelligence that is immediately and consistently recognizable across her episodes. She understands that. She understands that the frame is not just a window onto the story, but an active participant in it, that where you place the camera, how far you are from the faces, whether you are looking up or down, whether you choose to hold or to cut, all of it carries meaning. Her episodes have a quality of unhurried precision that gives even the action sequences a kind of compositional stillness at their center. You are never confused during an action scene in her episodes. You always know where you are, who is doing what is at stake. That sounds like a low bar. In contemporary action filmmaking, it is actually a very high one, and she clears it every time. Joseph Kubota Oladike's episodes are kinetic in a complementary way. He lets the camera move in the action sequences with a controlled energy that amps up the tension without descending into chaos. The Whiskey Peak sequences under his direction have a particular urgency that matches the deceptive hospitality turn to violence nature of that arc perfectly. The cinematography this season leans into a color language that distinguishes each island with remarkable intentionality. Logu Town is warm gold and shadow, a place of endings and beginnings simultaneously, lit like a memory. Little Garden is a deep, primordial green-gray, ancient and enormous, the palette of a world that existed long before humans arrived. And Drum Island is blue-white gold, spare and beautiful and unforgiving, the visual glamour of isolation. These are not arbitrary choices. The lighting and the color grading are telling you what each place means before a single character speaks. There are specific images in this season that I keep returning to. The shot at the top of Rivers Mountain as the Mary crests the peak and you see, for the first time, the full expanse of the Grand Line stretching out below. It is a frame that earns its ambition completely. The size, the light, the geometry of sea and sky in that shot communicate something that words would diminish. And in the Drum Island arc, there is a moment with pink snow that if you have not yet seen it, I want you to come to completely fresh. I will say only this, it is the most beautiful single image the show has ever created and it is earned every frame of the way. Let us talk about the music now, because the score for this season is doing extraordinary work that I think even fans who loved the first season may not fully notice on a first watch, which is actually the highest compliment you can pay to a score. The best film and television music operates below the level of conscious awareness, shaping your emotional response to what you are watching without announcing itself. Sonia Belousova and Gianna Ostinelli, the composing duo behind both seasons and also behind the first two seasons of Netflix The Witcher, have deepened and expanded the musical world they built in season 1 in ways that feel both consistent and genuinely new. The theme established for the show had pirates in season 1 is back, but it has grown. It has been orchestrated with more complexity, more harmonic weight, more emotional range. It no longer sounds like a theme for a crew that is beginning. It sounds like a theme for a crew that is beginning. Each character has their own instrumental identity, their own sonic fingerprint that threads through the score whenever they are the emotional focus of a scene. Chopper's theme, which arrives in the Drum Island section of this season, is built around a simple folk-like melody with a fragility to it, a quality of something small and uncertain trying very hard to be brave that is genuinely beautiful. When you hear it for the first time, fully realized, in the context of what is happening on screen at that moment, it is almost physically affecting. The original songs woven into this season are another triumph. Pray to the Sun featuring Declan Deborah and The Hue is a piece that sounds like it could have been playing at the edge of the world for centuries. A bardic, ancient energy that sits perfectly in the world of the Grand Line. And am I enough? The original song performed by Aura that is specifically connected to Chopper's arc is the kind of song that lives in you after the credits roll. It is simple in the best way, a direct question asked with a voice that is all vulnerability and no armor. It is the emotional thesis statement of Chopper's story, and in the context of where it plays, it undoes you. The sound design throughout is meticulous. The sounds of the Mary, the creak of her timber, the specific music her hull makes against different bodies of water have been carefully crafted to give her sonic identity that makes her feel alive. The Grand Line itself sounds different from the East Blue. There is a quality to the ambient audio of these new waters, a deeper, stranger undertone, as if the sea itself is aware that different rules apply here. That kind of detail is invisible unless you are paying attention, and it rewards the being. And then the action sequences and technical craft. Let us give this the space it deserves, because this season is operating at a level of physical filmmaking that is simply spectacular. The fight sequences in season 2 are consistently better than what the first season achieved. Better choreographed, better shot, better edited, more deeply embedded in character psychology. The 100 enemy sequence featuring Zoro, already mentioned in passing, is the obvious showstopper. A prolonged, inventively staged combat that never loses its spatial coherence, even as it escalates from individual duels to full-scale chaos. The choreography here is built on Zoro's specific style, the three-sword Santoryo, and the geometry of how that style works against different opponents has been thought through completely. Every exchange has logic, every escalation has cause. Luffy's fights this season have a wilder, more improvisational quality that matches his character. The Gum Gum attacks have been rendered with a combination of practical stunt work and VFX that makes the elasticity feel genuinely physical rather than purely digital. When Luffy stretches his arm or rockets himself across a space using the recoil of his own rubber body, it reads as a physical fact rather than a special effect, which is a remarkable achievement given how inherently CGI dependent the power is. The VFX work broadly this season is of a quality that surpasses nearly everything currently on streaming television. There are environments that would simply not exist without digital construction. The Red Line River's mountain, the prehistoric landscape of Little Garden, and they are rendered with a solidity and a texture richness that puts them beyond the obviously artificial. Little Garden in particular, with its enormous dinosaurs and ancient botanical skill, looks like nothing else on television. The giants Dory and Brogy are achieved through a combination of forced perspective, green screen, and digital enhancement. And the technique is seamless enough that you stop thinking about how it was done and simply accept that these enormous ancient warriors exist. And then there is Chopper, the full CGI character who had the most to prove, and the answer is that the visual effects team delivered something exceptional. The hair physics, the eye reflectivity, the way light moves across his body differently in different environments, the micro movements of his face in emotional moments, all of it has been executed with genuine artistry. He does not look like a video game character. He does not look like a cartoon dropped into live action. He looks somehow like he belongs to this world. No review is honest if it only tells you what a piece of work gets right. And this is a show I genuinely love this season, which means I owe you the truth about its imperfections as much as its strengths, because honest criticism from a genuine place of affection is more useful than either uncritical praise or reflexive fault finding. The first issue worth naming is that Sanji as a character is underserved in this season's first two-thirds. Thus, Skylar is a good actor, and he does excellent work in the moments the script gives him. But compared to the growth that Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp receive across the first 8 episodes, Sanji is noticeably sidelined. He is present, he fights well, he has his characteristic personality moments, but his arc is not developed with the same depth or care that the others receive. And for a character whose complexity and emotional history are so rich in the source material, that feels like a missed opportunity. The season corrects this somewhat in the final 2 episodes, but the imbalance in the first half is real and noticeable if you are paying attention. The second criticism is a pacing issue that sits specifically in the transition between the Whiskey Peak and Little Garden arcs. These are 2 consecutive arcs that have very different tonal registers. The deceptive warmth of Whiskey Peak, followed by the prehistoric grandeur of Little Garden, and the narrative bridge between them feels slightly rushed in the middle episodes of the season. A moment or two more breathing room between these 2 arcs would have allowed the emotional pivot to land more cleanly. Instead, there's a slight gear grind where the show is moving faster than the audience needs it to in order to process the shift. Third, some of the new antagonists introduced in the Baroque Works context of Whiskey Peak, the agents of the criminal organization that functions as the season's background threat, are introduced and then not given quite enough depth before they are swept aside. David Dasmalkian as Mr. Tao 3 is a pleasurably eccentric addition, and he makes the most of his screen time. But the nature of his role means he arrives and departs before he can make a truly lasting impression. This is not necessarily a failure of the writing. These characters exist in the source material in a similar register, but in the context of a live-action television drama that has been thoughtful about character development elsewhere, the relative shallowness of certain Baroque Works agents is noticeable. None of these are fatal flaws, none of them diminish what this season achieves overall, but I believe you deserve to know they exist, because a fair review acknowledges the full picture. Now let us pull back the curtain on how this season came to be, because the production story of One Piece Season 2 is genuinely fascinating, full of creative challenges and practical ingenuity, and the kind of collaborative ambition that is rare in the current television landscape. The journey from season 1 to season 2 was not simply a matter of rolling cameras again. Season 1 wrapped in 2022 and was released in August 2023. The confirmation of season 2 came quickly, within weeks of release, which indicated Netflix's confidence in the franchise. But the development process that followed was more complex than simple continuation. The creative team had to make some fundamental decisions about where the story was going, specifically whether to include the Alabasta arc, the manga's first truly epic storyline, in season 2 or to hold it for season 3. The choice to end season 2 at Drum Island, confirming the arrival of Chopper as the season's emotional crescendo, was reportedly made in direct consultation with Eiichiro Oda himself, who has remained more actively involved in this adaptation than any creator of comparably I am aware of. Oda did not simply lend his name as executive producer and walk away. He has been a creative partner across both seasons, offering notes, approving changes, occasionally pushing back on specific choices, and reportedly having genuine enthusiasm for the live action team's vision. The fact that the story's architect has been this closely engaged is not incidental. It is fundamental to why the adaptation feels spiritually accurate even when it diverges from the source material. The filming of season 2 took the production to Cape Town, South Africa, which served as the primary physical home for the season's enormous studio builds. Cape Town Film Studios, one of the most sophisticated production facilities on the African continent, became the base of operations for an undertaking that involved constructing some of the most elaborate sets in the show's history. The Going Merry, which was physically built for season 1 and remains one of the most impressive practical set constructions in modern television, returned and was expanded to allow for more nuanced below-deck scenes. Additional environments, including the Whiskey Peak Village and sections of Logo Town, were constructed at scale to give the actors tangible physical reality to inhabit. What is fascinating about the production decision to base primarily in Cape Town is what it says about the show's commitment to physical filmmaking in an era when green screen production is the cheaper and easier choice. For a series that could have been shot almost entirely in a volume LED stage, the technology that The Mandalorian and other recent productions have popularized, One Piece Season 2 made a conscious choice to build real things whenever possible. The production designer and their team constructed environment after environment with a thoroughness that the camera rewards. When the characters are in Logwood Town, the ground beneath their feet is real cobblestone. The market stalls have real merchandise. The architecture has actual depth. You feel it. It translates. One fascinating production detail involves the chopper sequences in Drum Island. Because Chopper is fully CGI, the actors who shared scenes with him were working with a combination of reference objects and Michaela Hoover's voice performance, which was sometimes delivered live on set via headphones rather than added entirely in post-production. Katie Sadler has spoken about the experience of acting opposite a tennis ball on a stick as genuinely challenging and genuinely rewarding. She had to find Chopper emotionally before the visual effects team rendered him, and that process of working without a physical partner forced her to go to a very real, undefended emotional place in her performance. The result is that her chemistry with Chopper on screen feels earned and genuine rather than composited together. Joe Manganiello underwent significant physical and psychological preparation for the role of Crocodile. He has spoken about spending months studying the manga's portrayal of the character and working with the writing team to understand the specific quality of Crocodile's menace, which is intellectual and strategic rather than overtly aggressive. Manganiello, who is known for physical roles, deliberately dialed down the physical expressiveness of his usual performance style and built Crocodile from stillness outward. The gold hook, the cigar, the enormous dark coat, all practical pieces of costume that gave him physical anchors for the character's imposing presence. The score's recording sessions, with Belosova and Ostinelli working with a live orchestra expanded from the first season's ensemble, took place over several weeks and generated a musical library for the season that reportedly exceeds the total runtime of all 10 episodes combined. The level of compositional detail, every significant character, every major location, every emotional beat having its own distinct musical identity, speaks to the creative investment being made at every level of this production. And Oda's personal letter to fans, released ahead of the season's premiere, captures something important about the creative relationship between the manga artist and the live action team. In it, he writes with genuine warmth about watching his characters come alive in a new form, and he expresses something that sounds less like a creator tolerating an adaptation and more like a creator genuinely moved by what the adaptation has found in his work. That quality of creator blessing, real, not transactional, radiates through the finished product. In terms of reception, this season arrived and was immediately embraced with a fervor that exceeded even the considerable success of season 1. On Rotten Tomatoes, One Piece Season 2 Into the Grand Line achieved a perfect 100% critics score upon launch, a figure that, as Forbes noted in a headline in the days following release, set two separate Netflix Rotten Tomatoes records simultaneously. The audience score settled around 96%, representing a remarkable alignment between critical and popular response that is exceptionally rare for a franchise title of this scale. The critical consensus language used phrases including wildly impressive, mind-blowing, and bigger, better, richer, and more ambitious in almost every way than its freshman voyage. On Netflix's own charts, the season debuted at number 1 globally and maintained that position across its first week of availability. Collider reported that it proved the 3-year wait for season 2 was worth every day, a headline that captured the mood of the online conversation neatly. The show topped Netflix charts in dozens of countries and generated the kind of sustained social media conversation, fan art, reaction videos, clip sharing, analytical deep dives that indicates genuine cultural engagement rather than passive consumption. There was no meaningful gap between critical and audience reception this season, which is notable. Some franchise properties divide critics and general audiences for various reasons: pacing, tonal choices, fidelity to source material. Here, the response was remarkably unified. Critics who came in skeptical about the live action format came out converted. Fans of the manga who had spent years concerned about the adaptation were, by and large, celebrating. Newcomers who found the first season on Netflix and had never engaged with the original One Piece came away deeply invested. Award season is still unfolding at the time of this review, but the season has already been recognized in several categories for production design, visual effects, and original music. Whether it receives the broader television awards recognition that its craft genuinely merits remains to be seen, but the conversation is happening. Let us talk about where this season sits within the larger franchise and what it means for the story going forward. One Piece as a narrative is divided, roughly speaking, into two great halves: the East Blue Saga and the Grand Line Saga. Season 1 covered the East Blue, a relatively contained world where a young, unformed crew found each other and discovered what they were capable of. Season 2 marks the transition into the Grand Line, a genuinely new world, vaster and more dangerous, where everything the crew learned in the East Blue is put to the test and often found insufficient. In the context of the manga, the arcs covered in this season represent the story reaching a level of creative ambition and emotional complexity that the author had been building toward from the very beginning. The 5 arcs from Logo Town to Drum Island are where One Piece first demonstrates its full potential as a narrative, where the comedy and the adventure and the found family warmth are joined by genuine tragedy, genuine moral complexity, and a deepening of the thematic concerns that will carry through the rest of the story. If season 1 showed you what One Piece was, season 2 shows you what it is becoming. Compared to the first season, this second chapter is objectively more ambitious in almost every dimension: scope, budget, number of narrative threads, emotional range. but it does not lose what the first season had. The bond between the crew members is actually stronger this season because those relationships have had time to deepen. The joy when they triumph together is bigger because the cost of what they have gone through to reach the triumph is clearer. Where does it rank within the franchise? Among the existing live action adaptations of anime or manga properties, it is, in my view, the finest. It stands alongside or above adaptations like Rurouni Kenshin, which had the advantage of live action storytelling culture in Japan behind it, and it surpasses virtually everything the Western industry has previously attempted in this space. But more importantly, it stands on its own terms, as a piece of television storytelling, as something worth taking seriously. Season 3 has already been confirmed, with Joe Tracz and Ian Stokes serving as co-showrunners, and the story will take us into the Alabasta arc, the story of a kingdom being destroyed from the inside by the man we have been watching build his empire in the shadows across this entire season. The anticipation for what comes next is not just the generic appetite for more, it is the specific, earned eagerness of a story that has spent an entire season carefully laying the groundwork for something tremendous. The depth of this season is not just in its execution, it is in its ideas. And this is where I want to spend some time, because One Piece is a story that has always operated on multiple levels simultaneously, and Season 2 is no exception. At its most fundamental, this is a story about freedom. Every character in One Piece carries some version of the same wound they have been told by the world, by circumstances, by the people who were supposed to protect them, that they are not allowed to become what they dream of being. Luffy was told he was too small and too weak and too reckless to be a pirate, let alone the Pirate King. Zoro was told that his ambition to be the greatest swordsman was arrogance. Nami was told that the world she was born into was the world she would die in. And Chopper was told, by both of the worlds he belonged to, that he did not belong to either. The Grand Line, in the story's symbolic grammar, is the place where all of that gets tested. It is not a friendly sea. It does not reward hope. It rewards will. And the distinction matters enormously. Hope is passive. It is waiting for the world to change. Will is active. It is choosing to change despite the world. And this season is at its deepest level a study in the difference between the two. The concept of inherited will, the idea that a dream does not die when the dreamer dies, that it passes forward to whoever loved them, whoever was changed by them, whoever carries their memory, is central to the Drum Island arc and to Chopper's story specifically. Doctor, he looks impossible dream, to cure any illness, to bring cherry blossoms to a frozen island, to prove that medicine and love and hope are the same thing. He cannot realize it himself. His body fails before his will does, but his dream does not disappear, it becomes Chopper's dream. And the act of carrying someone else's dream forward, of saying, I may not have been there at the beginning, but I will be there for the finish, is one of the most profound emotional gestures the story can make. There is something here too about the idea of what family means. The Straw Hat Pirates do not share blood. They share choice. They have elected each other across a journey that began with Luffy deciding, on the basis of pure instinct and open-heartedness, that these particular people were his people. And this season deepens the meaning of that choice by testing it, by putting the crew in situations where they could rationally choose themselves, their own survival, their own interests over each other, and watching them choose each other every time. Not because it is a smart move, but because that is what family does. The show also carries, woven through its adventure structure, a sustained meditation on the relationship between power and freedom. The word government, the shadowy institutional authority that functions as the background threat, is the embodiment of a world that believes control is more important than liberty, that the maintenance of order justifies any sacrifice of individual freedom. Pirates in this Trolli's moral universe are not primarily criminals. They are rebels against that order. They are people who looked at a world that told them where to stand and chose to move anyway. This is a political idea dressed in the clothes of a pilot adventure. and it is presented not as propaganda but as lived experience. You understand this conflict through the experiences of specific people with specific wounds, not through abstract argument. That is how the best storytelling works. It makes you feel the truth before you understand it intellectually. The cultural conversation around this season has been as interesting, in some ways, as the season itself, because what One Piece Season 2 Into the Grand Line represents, beyond the story it is telling, is proof of something that the industry has been debating and largely doubting for years. For almost as long as there has been a film and television industry with access to anime and manga as source material, there has been an assumption that live action adaptation fundamentally cannot work for these stories. That the visual language and emotional register of animation is simply incompatible with the constraints of physical reality. Ghost in the Shell, Dragon Ball Evolution, Death Note, a parade of attempts that ranged from mediocre to genuinely harmful to their source material's reputation. The live-action adaptation was the form of flattery that kept coming out as insult. Netflix's One Piece has definitively broken that assumption, and season 2 has done it so thoroughly, so publicly, and with such quality that it changes the conversation permanently. Because this is not a successful adaptation despite being live action. It is a successful adaptation because it has understood what live action can give to the story that animation does not: the specific weight of physical reality, the slight roughness and impermanence of real human faces in real light, the gravity of genuine landscapes, the sense that these people are actually occupying bodies that can be hurt and healed and changed by their experiences. What One Piece has done for the cultural perception of anime to live action adaptation is what the Lord of the Rings films did for the cultural perception of fantasy adaptation. It has established that with the right creative investment, the right respect for source material, and the right talent in every position, this can be done beautifully. And now every conversation about adapting manga or anime into live action will happen in the shadow of this reference point. The bar has been raised permanently. The show has also contributed to a broader global One Piece renaissance. Manga sellers have surged in markets that previously had limited engagement with the property. The anime has attracted new viewers who started their One Piece journey with Netflix. The franchise, which was already the world's best-selling manga series, has expanded its audience in ways that Oda and Shueisha could not have fully anticipated. The live-action adaptation has not cannibalized the source material, it has amplified it. There is also something worth noting about the show's representation. Its casting of Ingaki Godoy, a Mexican actor, as the lead of a globally beloved franchise, and the deliberately international ensemble that has been assembled around him. This is a show that looks like the world looks in its human diversity, and that choice has been noticed and appreciated by audiences globally. In a media landscape still working through complicated questions about whose stories get told by whom, One PC lives by example. Alright, from this point on, we are going into full spoiler territory. If you have not seen this season yet, this is your warning. Pause, go watch it, and come back. You will thank me later. Still here? Okay, let us go deep. The season opens in Logo Town with something genuinely breathtaking. Luffy standing at the platform where Gold Roger was executed, stretching up to grab the bar where the Pirate King's neck once rested, letting himself hang there for a moment in silence. And the show does something unexpected in this scene. It does not play it for triumph or for bravado. It plays it for weight. For the feeling of a young man who has lived his entire life with this dream and who is now standing at the place where that dream's greatest predecessor ended, feeling the full gravity of what he is attempting. Godoy's face in this scene is quiet and open in a way that he has rarely been permitted to be on screen. It is the face of someone who is, for just a moment, genuinely afraid, not of dying, of not being enough. And then the smile breaks through, and the fear does not disappear. It transforms into fuel. That distinction is everything. The Logo Town arc brings back Buggy the Clown in a scene that is genuinely funny, and also serves as a quietly important narrative mirror. Buggy, who was present when Roger died, who knew Roger personally, who has spent his entire life trying to monetize that proximity to greatness without doing the work to become great himself. He is what Luffy could become if ambition were just costume without conviction. The show understands this contrast without overstating it. The appearance of Dragon, Luffy's father, who has been absent from his son's entire life and whose identity as the world's most dangerous revolutionary is a secret Luffy does not yet know, is handled with a kind of careful, charged restraint that sets up something enormous. We see a man watching his son from a distance, intervening in a moment of crisis with power that suggests depths we are not yet permitted to see, and then stepping back into shadow. The actor playing Dragon, Drigo Sanchez, has almost no dialogue, but his presence in those scenes is immense. There is so much in that silence, a lot that has chosen distance for reasons the show is not yet ready to reveal. A man who is fighting a war too big to be a father. It is heartbreaking in implication. Rivers Mountain introduces Laboon, a whale who has been waiting at the entrance to the Grand Line for decades for a pirate crew that promised to return for him. This subplot, which could have been a small digression, is handled by the show with genuine emotional care. The image of this enormous creature, alone on threshold between worlds, scarred from decades of beating himself against a wall in frustration and grief, is one of the season's most haunting visual concepts. And Yuffie's response to Laboon, immediate, uncomplicated, the instinctive empathy of someone who recognizes loneliness without judgment, is one of the season's purest character moments for him. He makes a promise to this whale. He means it completely. And the promise itself is a kind of thematic statement about what fidelity and loyalty mean in this story. Whiskey Peak is where the season takes its first genuinely dark turn. The crew arrives on an island where pirates are treated as celebrities, welcomed, feasted, celebrated, and the warmth feels real, which is the trap, because Whiskey Peak is a town run by Baroque Works agents in disguise, bounty hunters who lull their targets to sleep with hospitality before moving in for the kill. And the scene where this deception unravels, when the crew wakes up surrounded and the festivity curdles into threat, is staged with a rising claustrophobic dread that is genuinely unsettling. What the show does brilliantly in Whiskey Peak is use the deception as a way to introduce Miss Ventevi, whose own deception within the deception changes everything. Vive, a princess of Alabasta who has infiltrated Baroque Works as a spy, is trying to gather information to save her kingdom from Crocodile's scheme. And Charitra Chandran is excellent as review, the moment where Vivi's mask slips and you understand who she actually is and what she is actually carrying, is a genuine emotional pivot point. She is not an antagonist. She's a person in an impossible position, and the show trusts the audience to make that reassessment quickly and completely. The most discussed scene in Whiskey Peak, the one that had the entire online fandom in absolute pieces, is the scene between Zoro and the 100 Baroque Works agents. Zoro, tasked with protecting the unconscious crew, faces an army alone. And the show lets this play out with an operatic grandeur that is completely earned. This is not just a fight scene, it is a declaration. 100 fighters, each expecting that Zoro will fold. And instead, Zoro fights his way through all of them, not because he is untouchable, but because his will is simply larger than his body's ability to give up. By the end, he is cut, exhausted, barely standing, and he is standing. The final image of that sequence, Zoro surrounded by fallen opponents, the going merry visible in the distance, dawn beginning to come, is one of the season's defining images. Little Garden gives us Tori and Proji, and the thing that makes their story land so hard is the specific nature of their duel. These two giants have been fighting each other on this island for 100 years over an argument about which of them made the bigger catch on the day they arrived. The catch has long since decayed and been forgotten. The argument is technically unresolvable, but neither of them will stop fighting, because to stop would be to suggest that what they have sacrificed, a century of their lives, their bodies, their connection to the world, was not worth it. Their duel is both absurd and profound simultaneously, and when the show links into that duality, it finds something beautiful. Luffy, who does not understand complicated things but understands important ones, responds to Dory and Brogy with pure respect. Their dedication to a fight that makes no sense from the outside is, to him, something noble and deserving of honor. And then the villain's interference, Crocodile's agents manipulating the duel to prevent a clean resolution, is genuinely infuriating in the precise way good dramatic villainy should be. You are angry because you care about the giants. You care about the giants because the show made you care about them. That emotional chain is the mechanics of good storytelling, and it functions perfectly here. Now, Drum Island and Dr. Harrylook's death. I want to talk about this honestly because it is the most emotionally devastating sequence of the season and possibly the most devastating thing the show has done in any episode across both seasons. Mark Harlick as Harlook walks into Wapol's castle knowing he is walking toward his death. He has eaten a poisonous mushroom. He has hours left, and rather than dying alone, he has chosen to use those hours to try one last time to heal the sick, the doctors that Wapol has imprisoned. He does not know it is a trap. He does not know Wapol has no intention of letting him help anyone. He knows none of that. He goes because it is who he is, and when the trap is revealed, when Wapol taunts him, when Look realizes there was nothing to be done, he does not break, he laughs. He looks at his life, at his ridiculous, impossible, beautiful life he has left in service of a dream that the world told him was nonsense, and he laughs with the full-throated joy of someone who has no regrets. And then he blows himself up so that Wapol cannot claim to have killed him, so that Chopper will not have his death on his conscience. He chooses the ending of his own story. He makes it his. Harlick plays this entire final sequence with a grace that is almost unbearable to watch. There is a moment, just before the end, where his eyes find something in the distance that only he can see, some imagined future where his dream has been realized, where the pink cherry blossoms fall on Drum Island, where Chopper is not alone, and he smiles. Not the smile of a man dying, the smile of a man who has done everything he came here to do. And then silence. And Chopper's cry, which is wordless and genuine and rendered by Michaela Hoover's voice with a rawness that cuts right through every layer of CGI and composite and digital artifice and reaches you as pure human grief. You are not watching a cartoon reindeer lose his father. You are watching someone lose their father. The show has made that true. The finale spins no sequence. The moment where Dr. Kureha, using Hiriluk's formula, turns the snowfall above Drum Island pink as Chopper and the crew sail away is, as I said earlier, the most beautiful image the show has ever created. But what gives it its full impact is everything that preceded it. The whole weight of Hiriluk's dream, Chopper's grief, Kureha's hidden love, the crew's growing understanding of who they have just added to their family. When the snow turns pink and Chopper looks up and understands what it means, that his father's dream came true, that it did not die with him, that love can be stronger than death when someone decides that it is, the show achieves something that I genuinely believe is among the finest single moments in streaming television history. Korea, in this moment, is not just saying goodbye to Chopper. She is completing a life's work, hers and Hylux's. She is delivering the ending of a story that was started by someone who loved her and whom she loved and who never stopped believing. And the fact that she makes it happen while chasing the crew away, while hiding her own tears, while performing the role of the difficult, unloving woman who is glad to see the back of them, the layers of that performance, the love hidden inside the cruelty, is what makes it so shattering. Crocodile's revelation at the season's close, the full picture of what he has been building, the scope and the patience of his scheme, is a masterstroke of villain development. The best antagonists are not just obstacles, they are mirrors. And what Crocodile reflects back at the Straw Hat Pirates in his final moments this season is the question of what strength is actually for. He has it. He has wielded it meticulously, and he has used it to destroy rather than to create. Against Luffy, who has every instinct to use strength for protection, for his crew, for people he loves, Crocodile represents the corruption of ambition. What happens when the dream calcifies into control? Manganiello's performance in that final confrontation, all contained fury and contemptuous intelligence, is one of the season's great pleasures. We are not done with him, and the anticipation of the full Alabasta confrontation ahead is almost physically uncomfortable. There is no conventional post-credits scene in the final episode of this season. Instead, the show offers something more interesting, a quiet coda, a few seconds of the Going Merry sailing forward through waters we have not yet seen, her flag bright against an impossible sky, the sound of the crew's voices fading into wind. It is a promise, not a tease, a promise. We are not finished with these people. The story is not finished, and you would not want it to be. Setting aside the analysis and the criticism and the cataloging of what works and what does not, stepping around all of that and just speaking as a person who sat with this season for 10 hours across 2 days and came out the other side genuinely moved, let me try to tell you what this season actually did to me. I have been watching television and film for most of my life. I have written about it. I have thought about it obsessively. And that level of engagement can create a particular kind of distance, a glass between you and the work, where you are always watching from a place of slight remove, always half in the experience and half outside it, evaluating. It is not a bad way to engage with art, but it means that genuine emotional surprise. The feeling of being caught completely off guard by your own feelings is rarer for me than it might be for someone coming to a story fresh. Dr. Hairlook's death caught me completely off guard. Not the event itself, if you know the manga, you know what is coming, but the quality of it. The way Harlick played it, the specific texture of that goodbye. I found myself genuinely, involuntarily crying, which is not something I do often in front of a screen, and certainly not because I expected to. And the thing about that moment that I keep returning to is not the sadness of it, it is the joy inside the sadness. Harlook dies happy, completely, fully, unapologetically happy, and the show refuses to undercut that happiness with irony or with tragedy's conventional vocabulary of regret. He lived exactly as he wanted to live. He died with no unfinished business with himself. How many people get that? How many stories trust their characters with that? That moment shifted something in how I thought about this season, because it reminded me that the thing One Piece is really about, the thing it has always been about, beneath the adventure and the comedy and the spectacular fights, is the question of how to live, how to decide what your life is for, and whether the size of your dream is proportional to the size of your fear, or whether the bravest act is to dream as big as you can without any guarantee of what the cost will be. I watched the season one straight through. Then I went back and watched the Drum Island episodes again immediately. And then I watched Riluk's death scene alone. Just that scene. 3 times. And each time it was the same unavoidable, clean, devastating in the best way. Would I watch this again? Without hesitation. This is the kind of season that rewards repeat viewing, because the first time you are experiencing it for the story, and the second time you start to see all the work that was done beneath the surface, the foreshadowing, the visual rhymes, the musical callbacks, the character moments that land differently once you know where everyone ends up. It is richer the second time. That is the mark of real craft. The viewer who connects most deeply with this season is someone who has loved something enough that the thought of losing it was genuinely frightening, someone who has had a dream and been afraid to say it out loud, someone who has chosen a person or a crew of people and discovered that the choice made them larger than they were before. This season speaks to all of those experiences. It speaks to them directly, in the clearest possible language.